Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Observation Conversations, where today we will be giving our full review of Marvel's exuberant return to movie theaters after almost 2 years, just about 2 years, Black Widow. I am Jonathan Goodisonor, joined as always by my intrepid co-host, Reid Chrisman. How are you doing, Reid?
I'm doing quite well. I finally returned to the movie theaters this past weekend after over a year, and it was something special.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just we'll get into all of that, but I'll say for myself, my own return to the theater experience after over a year of not going to the theaters. I mean, it really does just take you back with how much you miss it.
Yeah.
It's like you're keenly aware of how much you miss it when it's happening, but you're even more so aware after you finally get to go back after all that time. It really is a special experience. For me, it was Godzilla vs. Kong. Admittedly, I was kind of hoping it would be Black Widow because while Godzilla vs. Kong was okay, it wasn't as good as this. But yeah, Black Widow was great. Not just a great movie to see in theaters. Only the third movie I've seen back in theaters since everything's reopened. It was really a triumphant return for Marvel after they've demonstrated how good of a job they can do on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
We almost got to a point where the question was being asked: do we need the Marvel movies when the Disney Plus shows are doing so well? But yes,
Yeah.
there is still very much a place for the movies.
Need, no, want, yes. Because,
Absolutely.
damn it, if there's not much more special than going out and seeing a true blockbuster.
Absolutely.
That's the point. Movie theaters, they might die off. They might be, they might not be showing like more of these artsy, smaller films that are like true, works of cinematic art. But for blockbusters, having that surround sound, having that giant screen, smell of popcorn in your lap.
It cannot be replicated.
It's
cannot
so
be
good.
replicated.
It's so
Absolutely.
good.
It absolutely cannot be replicated. It's incredibly special. And it was especially nice because, there's just that certain scale that you can achieve in one of these movies that you can't really you can't realize as fully in the Disney Plus series, as good as they are. And so watching this movie, not just watching it, but watching it in theaters as it was meant to be seen, it reminded me what made these movies so special in the first place. After a 2-year absence from the last one to now, it reminds me why these movies were such events and still are such events, because it's just different when, as you said, you're watching it on the biggest screen possible. You've got the surround sound coming in from every angle. It's a true, event-like, experience. So how this is going to work is we're going to do a very short non-spoiler section, just tell you if we recommend the movie or not, and then we will shift into a full spoiler recap of the movie and our thoughts. So with that, do you want to lead us off, Reid, with what you thought about Black Widow and just general recommendation terms?
Yes, I do. So I will say, before I get into that, I just want to say I'm glad that Marvel is doing both Disney Plus and bring stuff back to the theaters. Because I'd truly forgotten how much, like you said, it's an event going out. With a lot of these Marvel shows, like most recently Loki, but before it was mostly Falcon the Winter Soldier. Like I was watching that after dinner with my parents every night, and that was like something we did as a family. But then to also have this movie to go out in theaters during the day with my family is like it's a little more special. It's like an activity. It's kind of a bonding experience.
Absolutely.
But as an actual film, it was really cool. It was a little weird, the where it was timed, timeline wise, like it's right after Civil War, before Infinity War. but they don't really tell you that super explicitly. Um,
Yeah, it's kind of revealed through the dialogue, but it's
yeah,
not
it's
the
it's
doesn't get a
it's
title
revealed
card
through the
for it.
dialogue, but it's like, I don't know. For me, it just kind of felt weird because it's not a period piece,
Hmm.
but it also doesn't take place during the present day Marvel, which is 2024, I think.
Yeah,
Uh,
23. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
yeah, so I was like, it felt a little jarring, but um, it was so cool. Great action sequences.
Mm.
Shows that Marvel has the chops to do proper like spy thrillers.
Hmm.
A lot of stuff straight out of Jason Bourne. Um, it had that classic Marvel charm where it's like plenty of action, but then they find ways to throw in some humor,
Hmm.
lighten the tension a little bit. Um, yeah, I mean, I have to give this like a solid 8 out of 10, I think.
Hmm. And I think I'm going to be largely in agreement with you on that. I thought Black Widow was very effective, and I really enjoyed my watching experience of it. I think, as you said, I mean, this movie I think was perhaps one of the best examples yet of Marvel being able to really build on that, action spy thriller, very James Bourne-esque, type of movie. Of course, we've already gotten that a bit with Winter Soldier and Civil War, but it's even more so, on the nose here and done very well. It gave, I think, certainly the fans what they've long been asking for, which is to build out more of Natasha Romanoff's character, beyond just having her as a side character and just getting sprinklings of flashbacks and flavor dialogue in other people's movies, and that was great to finally be able to really dive into this character's past and you know exactly what it is she's running from, and what kind of all of the you know uh, accessory pieces that orbit her life and her existence,
Yeah.
including everything that she left behind that's now catching up with her. So that was fantastic. I thought the side characters were very well cast and were fantastic, very effective. um I think the plot was pretty good as Marvel films go. Of course, the big asterisk you have to put next to everything in this movie is that this is the first time we've had a Marvel movie that doesn't advance the general Marvel soap opera forward. This is a movie
Yeah.
that takes place that's essentially one extended flashback. And so we'll talk in the spoilers section. We'll discuss, what, everyone's been discussing since the movie's come out, which is that, the movie is good, but is it truly necessary? But I think that, with that acknowledgement, the plot was pretty good. It was engaging. It had certain parts that I kind of had questions with, nothing that really pulled me out of it, which
Yeah.
is good. um, and it also had some moments that were very strong, so I want to give it credit for that as well. So yeah, on the whole, I think definitely very effective and pretty good. I would say I'm going back and forth between giving it a 7 and an 8 out of 10. I may tip it towards an 8 out of 10. Just because on the observation conversation scale, we don't do half measures, we don't do 0.5s, so I'm gonna tip it up to an 8 out of 10. Um, Definitely recommend it. It's definitely in the top 2/3 of Marvel films, and I would say
Mm,
it's a shining example of a Marvel
yeah.
film that you really do not need to be super well versed in the lore to understand. Like with
Or
a
at
lot
least
of
to
them.
enjoy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, or at least to enjoy. This definitely felt like it was, not only was the plot very graspable for people who are not super into the Marvel stuff or the superhero stuff, but it felt just generally disconnected from the kind of overall, plot developments that we know are happening in this period of time. Very, very much in the same way as like the Disney Plus shows, where you have WandaVision or the Falcon and the Winter Soldier or Loki, which are all taking place in their own corners of the MCU, but they're not really foundational to what's happening in the big picture. So, and that's to its credit, because it's we don't need to see more of Natasha hanging out with the Avengers. Like, we've already seen that. This is Natasha in her kind of diving back into her old life, which is what we've always wanted to see. So
Yeah.
definitely recommend it. 8 out of 10. Very good. One of these days we'll have to like do a ranking of all the Marvel movies, just to kind of place them all.
Marvel movie tier list.
Honestly, though, I think that's a good idea. Yeah,
that would be a good episode.
Yeah, I think I could definitely place it in the top 2/3, maybe top half, but I'd have to look at all of them again.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah, but absolutely effective. Highly recommend Black Widow, and we'll talk about why in the spoiler section. So if you haven't seen it, we absolutely recommend that you do see it. And yes,
we recommend you see it in theaters too.
Yes,
I know it's
absolutely.
on Disney Plus. Go watch it in theaters.
Yeah, do yourself a favor and watch it in theaters. Absolutely. I mean, it really is an experience, and I think it was a great reminder of why we did this in the first place. Because I mean, it's just it can't be matched by just watching it at home. Despite the convenience of it, you just the picture and the sound and everything. It's a true theatrical experience. So highly recommend you see it in theaters. And so with that, I think we will shift to our spoiler section and our spoiler review for Black Widow. Yeah. So, Reid, I watched this movie, Black Widow, when it came out on opening day, July 9th. You've seen it a little bit more recently. So
yeah, I just saw it this past weekend. So
yeah. So do you want to lead us kind of through what happened in this movie?
Yeah, sure. I'll try to make it a little bit brief so we can really dive into what we want to talk about. But we open with Thaddeus, Thunderbolt Ross, sending in a bunch of troops, hunting down Black Widow because she was in violation of the Sokovia Accords. So this takes place right after Civil War.
Now, before we get to that, I think you might be missing the very beginning of the movie, the opening sequence.
Oh, right. You're right. Yes, I did forget that. No, so we actually open in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what year.
1995.
95. Okay. Yeah. And we see a young girl with red hair that's been dyed blue, and her little sister with blonde hair, and there's a mom and a dad, and they're just enjoying their kind of Midwest life. And so the dad comes home and he's like, "It's time, we gotta go. Girls, this is the adventure I was telling you about. We finally get to go on." They pack up all their shit and they fly out of the driveway. Cops start chasing them, and we're like, "What the heck is going on?" And it's pretty clear that the girl with blue hair is Natasha. I mean, they refer to her by name.
Yeah.
And when I was watching, I was like, was Natasha originally American and then kidnapped for the Red Room? But as we learn, they fly out to an airfield. Family gets into a plane while the dad, who turns out to be a super soldier, kind of takes this giant dumpster and like throws it out of the way of the plane. And then in one of the coolest action sequences I've seen in a while, the dad has this rifle and he's like shooting at these police cars, shooting at the tires so they veer off course, trying to keep the airfield clear so that the plane can take off. And the plane starts going, and then he's running after the plane, and he jumps onto this wing, and then he rolls over onto his back, and then he continues shooting at the cops. And then he looks forward and shoots in front of the plane to like get the cars to like steer out of the way of the plane. Oh man, it was so cool.
It was incredible. It was great opening.
Really cool. Yeah, and then they land in Cuba, and we find out that they're all Soviets, but this was a mission they were on to do some reconnaissance in Ohio for some reason. I don't know what government information you can get from Ohio.
Well, we'll talk about that because I've got some background on that. But yeah.
Yeah, but then they have to get separated, and Natasha and her sister are sedated and thrown into the back of a truck, and eventually return to the Red Room. And we also hear the dad talk to Dreykov. I don't know what Dreykov's title is. But there's this big government figure, Dreykov.
I think he's like a commander.
Yeah. But that is like, hey,
General
Dreykov. Hey, man, I want to get back in the fields. Like, this reconnaissance stuff is cool, but I want to be out there doing some real work. And we'll find out what that means later. Then we open on Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross sending troops after Black Widow, who we're led to believe is in the building, as she's coming out of the bathroom and trying to put on a change of clothes as kind of a disguise. And it turns out she's on a ferry already hundreds or even thousands of miles away from where Ross thought she was.
Yeah.
So she's made her escape.
She's hiding out in Norway, I think.
Yeah. Ant-Man, Falcon, Hawkeye, a bunch of people were arrested at the end of Civil War.
Yeah.
But Captain America escaped, and she escaped. So she ends up in Norway. She's in this kind of trailer. She's talking to this contact she has that I guess is kind of like a supplier, like an arms supplier.
Yeah.
But he hooks her up with this little kind of Winnebago type thing, and also hands her some old records from Budapest. But she decides not to go through them and just puts them in the back of her truck. Meanwhile, we are in somewhere in Italy, I think, or I don't know, somewhere in Europe.
No, I think it was Morocco, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, you're right. It was Morocco.
Yeah, I think
we're in Morocco. So. And we see a bunch of these Black Widows, kind of female agents, tracking down this one woman who's on the run. And we see this woman in blonde hair, tackle her to the ground, and then this red dust kind of breaks. And it turns out this woman was, I think, originally part of the Red Room, but had escaped and developed this chemical that can kind of break the chemical brainwashing that the current Red Room widows have.
Yeah.
So then they're both kind of free, but the woman who developed the chemical ends up dying, unfortunately. But then this girl is on the run, and escapes with the chemicals.
And it should be said, she doesn't just die, but I mean, Yelena does successfully kill her, and that's how, but not before she's able to be freed from the mind control. So I thought that was very kind of cool and gritty how they didn't try to keep Yelena completely clean. Like, she is still a murderer, and she
she successfully nailed her target, and then it was like in the dying breaths, she kind of realizes what she's done. It's like, oh shit, I've been brainwashed.
To
kill this person. That's not good. But then we cut back to Black Widow. Her generator shuts off, so she goes out to get some gas, hops in the truck. And then out of nowhere, a bomb goes off under the truck, and it flips and rolls onto this bridge and this flaming wreck, and we're like, what the fuck just happened? And then we see Taskmaster show up out of this truck, and they start kicking ass, throw their shield. It's there we kind of see the mirroring powers in the first place, where after they both kind of get Yeah, Natasha does her famous like jump up, wrap the legs around the head, and like does that, and then Taskmaster, throws her off and then does the same thing to her. So we can see that, they're able to mimic moves, and then they tussle and they both land in the same pose, and they're like standing up, and it's like, ooh, reflection. Yeah, but Taskmaster is apparently after these chemicals that were sent to Natasha. We don't know why or by how, but
well, they were in the box that Rick gave her.
They were in the box.
She didn't even know. She didn't know. Yeah.
But she didn't really know what they were, but she manages to grab them before essentially being thrown off the bridge.
Pretty much.
Yeah, she lands in the water. God, what happens after that?
Well, so after that, she goes to Budapest to investigate because she knows that this is where the chemicals
that skips, right? We never see her like climb out of the river or like where she gears up. She just kind of arrives in Budapest.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, she pretty much goes straight to Budapest.
Yeah.
But yeah, she knows that this thing that she doesn't even know what it is that Taskmaster was after came from Budapest, where she goes back to her old safe house there to investigate. And that's where she re-encounters her former fake sister.
Yeah, Yelena.
Yeah.
They have this really cool scene where they're kind of fighting each other because they don't know whether they can trust each other or not. We can see that, their skill sets are pretty evenly matched, which is really cool. And then, they eventually realize, okay, we need to work together. Elena's like, why did you bring the chemicals back? I specifically sent them to you to get them out of here. And Natasha was like, well, I didn't know what they were. You just kind of gave me these random ass chemicals. But then more widows show up, trying to hunt them down. We see them escape. There's like this classic rooftop chase sequence. There's a classic car, motorcycle chase sequence. Seeing Taskmaster in this giant, I don't know what you'd call it, like an APV tank.
Yeah.
Like this giant armored vehicle about a street wide that just plows through literally everything in its path. That was really terrifying to watch.
It was great.
Plow through the streets of Budapest. Yeah, but we see as they're escaping off the roof, they manage to kick one of the other widows kind of off the roof, and she lands in the middle of this courtyard. And they go down to see if they can save her, and they douse her with the chemical. So then she kind of wakes up out of this trance and is like, oh shit, I've been brainwashed too. And then we see her arm kind of come up with the widow's bite activate, and then she blasts herself in the face and essentially, ends her own life.
Right.
At the hands of Dreykov. So like, man, I didn't know the Red Room was still active. We gotta free all these people. Because Natasha's also thought that she killed Dreykov.
Yeah.
But they're like, we need some help.
Yeah, and in the heart-to-heart that we get after they escape, the reason that we it's revealed that the reason that Yelena sent Natasha the chemicals in the first place was because she was hoping that she would get the other Avengers to help her free the rest of the widows.
Taking down the Red Room, yeah.
But of course, the Avengers aren't really together right now, so.
Yeah, that band broke up.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, we don't have the Avengers. We need help, maybe from a super soldier. So they, get in contact with, her same contact who offers them this, rust bucket piece of shit of a helicopter. And they fly out to the Siberian maximum security prison. And there we see the dad. Time has not been kind to him at all. He's covered in tattoos, has this massive beard. And we see him arm wrestling every single other prisoner that he can. Just taking their arms and breaking them because he's hella strong. Um, he's talking about his glory days as the Red Guardian, which was, I guess, the Soviet Union's Cold War equivalent for Captain America.
Yeah.
And he's telling all these stories about how he fought Captain America, even though Captain America was frozen in the ice at the time.
Yeah.
So, he's kind of full of shit. But then...
Or is he? Because there's been some theories about maybe there's another way that might be true, but we'll get to that.
I have not heard these theories, so you're gonna have to inform me.
Yeah, we'll talk about
Unless it's some shit with like Isaiah Bradley, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the prison guards say that he has mail. It's a old Red Guardian figurine. Inside is an earpiece. He puts it in. Natasha and Yelena are talking to him, giving him instructions on how to escape the prison. Long story short, things don't go according to plan. They accidentally cause an avalanche and barely escape, with Natasha and Alexei hanging off this helicopter cable as Yelena flies them to safety. Him with his family, almost nearly united. They're like, why don't... well, first they grill Alexei for information. They're like, where the hell is the Red Room? And he's like, well, I don't know. So they're like, okay, who does? He's like, your mother. The mother that was on, that Ohio assignment with them is, Dracov's kind of right-hand woman.
Yeah, Melina.
Yeah, Melina. And she's super technically advanced. You can see that she's had her hand in a lot of the kind of brainwashing work. Because you see her experimenting on pigs.
Yeah, she pretty much created the brainwashing.
Yeah. She has enough control where she can even tell a pig to just stop breathing to the point where it dies. Pretty scary stuff.
Yeah.
We don't really know whether we can trust her or not. They're trying to bond as a family, but, they were never a real family. So they don't really get along, but they're also kind of the closest any of them ever got to a real family.
Yeah, and also I just wanted to say, as we get to the scene where we're at Melina's farm, is some of the funniest lines in the movie were the lines when it's you've got Natasha and Alexei and Yelena in the helicopter escaping. They had some great back and forth banter as those threes were reunited, including a very dark joke. But I kind of enjoy a dark sense of humor, so I thought it was really quite good and edgy. When Yelena was essentially explaining to her fake father how it was impossible, because Alexei, he makes some Borat comment about, must be their time of the month, because they're all moody and they're not talking to him. And then Yelena makes this comment very matter-of-factly about how that's a literal impossibility, because when you're drafted into the Red Room, you're essentially you're essentially forcefully sterilized. Your entire reproductive system is just ripped out.
Put their hand up there and rip everything out.
Yeah, and that was, for a Marvel movie, that was a pretty dark joke. So I really enjoyed
Marvel is getting pretty dark, actually. I mean, if you go back to like Falcon the Winter Soldier, Bucky and Sam are just throwing like shit ass at each other, just like cursing regularly on the downline. It's just like,
and I'm here for it.
Whoa.
I'm all for it. Yeah, because obviously there's still a lot of young kids who are really into the MCU, and they'll just be replaced by, as they grow up, they'll be replaced by more young kids who will get into it. But for those of us, people like you and me, who have been following it from the start, it feels like the MCU is kind of growing up with those original people a little bit. Obviously it can't go as far as perhaps we might like, but it's taking baby steps in that direction. So I do appreciate
either that or they're building up to Deadpool, which is going to stay rated R.
Yes.
As a MCU film. That'll be interesting.
Yeah. Fingers crossed that they start production on that soon.
Yeah. And then another funny joke is like when they finally get to Melina's farm, Alexei goes up to her. It's like, I've been in prison all this time. I have a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah,
He has like black and silver teeth, and he's like all sweaty and just.
Yeah, just the scene with him like squeezing into his old Red Guardian suit was great.
Yeah.
Also, I mean,
Pretending
this
it still
movie,
fits.
yeah, this movie had some very good banter. I would say I would almost as good as like Guardians of the Galaxy level banter.
Yeah.
I really did appreciate that. So
Yeah, I mean, Marvel is great about that, and just like even with very serious movies, they can throw in a casual banter, and it
oh yeah,
feels really natural, and it works really well.
absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, so we're at Melina's farm, and they're having
Yeah,
a little family reunion of sorts.
of sorts. But no one's really getting along. And while Yelena is like sulking in this, bedroom, Alexei goes in to try to talk to her, but he's kind of a narcissist and ends up just talking about his glory days. While Natasha talks to Melina, and it turns out Melina has notified the Red Room, and that, their agents are going to descend upon the house, at any minute. They're like, well, fuck, I guess we can't trust Melina. And then, these agents come in and attack, and they eventually just. That was actually another funny scene. We see the Red Guardian stand up, and then all of a sudden, like, he gets one blow dart hits him, and he's like, "You think this is gonna stop me?" And then he gets hit by like 20 more in his chest, and he's just...
I mean, that was literally straight out of The Incredibles, and I loved it. It was fantastic.
Yeah, and they eventually all get sedated. And then they're being flown to the Red Room. And no one has known the location of it because it is actually this giant facility floating in the sky, which I thought was really cool and also kind of dumb.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on the sky base.
Yeah, because for a premise, really cool, really interesting. For the U.S. government to have something like that makes a ton of sense. For the Soviet Union to have something like that, no, absolutely not. They cannot afford a giant.
Yeah, and but not even the Soviet Union, just like this auxiliary intelligence offshoot that survived the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I was like, where are they getting the funds for that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll talk about that. But yeah, the Red Room is a sky base essentially.
Yeah, it's this giant sky base. They're flown up into it. And Alexei and Natasha are thrown into cells, while I keep blanking on her name because I keep getting mixed up with Melina, but it's Yolanda.
Yelena.
Yelena. Yelena and Melina. I don't know. But Yelena is kind of on a surgery table. They want to, brainwash her essentially.
Yeah.
And Melina confronts Dreykov in his office, and she's like, "Hey, I brought these guys, these defectors. What should we do with them?" Dreykov's like, "Ah, you fucking idiot, you fucking fool." And he knows that Melina is actually Natasha wearing the kind of facial disguise cloak that we saw in Winter Soldier. And it turns out Melina is also disguised as Natasha in the cell, revealing this after Alexis pours his heart out to her as Natasha. But she escapes because she designed the cell. So she obviously designed a kind of way to get out of them from the inside. And then they have an earpiece so they can talk to Yelena on the surgery table. And they're like, "Hey, you have a knife in your belt pocket." So the three of them escape while Natasha is trying to confront Dreykov. Learns that she didn't kill him or his daughter in the explosion, like she initially thought. And it turns out they both survived, and his daughter is Taskmaster.
Yes.
Which I thought was actually a pretty interesting twist. Yeah, but he sends Taskmaster to go deal with the escapees. And Natasha tries to kill Dreykov, but she finds she can't because he has some kind of pheromone cologne thing that prevents her from
a
hurting
pheromone
him.
blocker. Yeah.
A little weird. My family was complaining about that a lot. I didn't have as big of a problem with it, but yeah. I thought it was gonna go the psychological approach, like you can't hurt me because I'm the only one who's ever cared for you, or blah blah blah. But yeah, she eventually.
Yeah, on the pheromone blocker. I'll say more about that at the end.
Okay. But she's struggling with that while the all the Black Widows in the Red Room are sent out to kind of deal with the escapees and protect Dreykov. Taskmaster shows up in the cells. Alexei, donning his Red Guardian uniform, starts fighting them, manages to get them locked in the cell. Melina is off trying to disable one of the engines that'll bring the whole building kind of slowly falling down. And, of course, shit goes sideways, and she somehow blows up like half of the engines at once.
Yeah.
So the thing just starts falling. So Dreykov is like, oh shit, calls for all the widows to protect him. So Yelena arrives a little too late, and then starts heading up towards Dreykov's office. Natasha learned from Melina that, she can get through the pheromone blocker by severing the nerve, whatever that means. And, the movie decides that means smashing your head on a table and giving yourself a bloody nose. And then, she's able to hurt him, but she's subdued by the other widows. And she's trying to fight them all off. She's kind of the superior one because she holds her own for a long time. I also think this could have been solved really easily if all of the widows had guns, but
yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he escapes with his guards, gets onto a helicopter. Yelena shows up, straps all the chemical vials to a kind of smoke grenade or a stun grenade, throws it in the room, managed to douse everyone at once. So they're all like, oh shit, we're free, we have to escape. So all of them start heading toward the runways. And then Natasha basically copies down all the data he had about different women kind of around the planet ready to be activated.
All the widows that are in the field,
Yeah. I don't think she deleted the information, but she copied it and then I guess disabled Dreykov from using it. Yeah, but all the widows escape. She shuts down Dreykov's program. But the building is just kind of collapsing. She falls through several floors, eventually, runs into Taskmaster in the cell. She frees her to try to make up for, attempted murder on a 6-year-old girl. But, Taskmaster is still angry. They fight a little bit, get separated again. Eventually, all the widows make it out onto their own helicopter or jet or whatever, and escape. Yelena goes after Dreykov's copter, climbs up onto one of the engines, and Natasha arrives just in time for Yelena to sacrifice herself by plunging kind of this widow baton into the engine, blowing it, which sends her in the explosion, like flying off the edge, and destroys the chopper. So Natasha jumps off the edge and is parachuting, shooting towards her, catches her, puts her in a parachute. Taskmaster is showing up, so then she bails. They're both kind of doing this really cool, free fall aerial fight, dodging around different debris. Before, how did they land?
Say again? How
did Natasha and Taskmaster land?
Oh, well, they fell out of the sky. They remember they had that whole sequence where they kind of
but
they kind of followed the debris.
Yeah, but did they get their hands on like another parachute, or like maybe Taskmaster had a parachute or something, or she had a spare one? I don't know.
I don't recall. I do not recall.
I think one of them had a parachute and they flung to each other. I don't know. I don't remember fully, but
no. Yeah, sorry. Natasha has a parachute, which she gives to Taskmaster. I don't remember
after also giving one to Yelena.
Yeah, but I don't recall how Natasha herself went.
I don't know.
I'm sure you can look it up. But
but they land on the ground amidst all this debris. Taskmaster gets sprayed by the chemical. Turns out Yelena is okay. Yelena gives her vest. Kind of this sisterly moment. Ross is showing up because Natasha kind of reported the crash. And she's like, you guys get out of here, I'll deal with him. And then we cut to her with her contact again. And she's managed to get her hands on a Quinjet.
Yeah.
Rick
says, Wilson, I think is the guy's name.
Okay.
The character's name.
Yeah, she's like, I'm going to go help Cap bust my friends out of prison. And she takes off. And that's...
and her hair is now the dyed
yeah, we see
blonde.
The blonde hair is short. We see her in the vest, which is what she had in Infinity War.
Yeah.
So it just kind of slots perfectly between those two movies. But yeah.
And the final shot of the movie is a very nice kind of touching reflection on
the fireflies.
Yeah, the fireflies over the tree, and
the Midwest.
Exactly. Reflecting on her. As we know, what will go on to be her sacrifice in Endgame, or Endgame. Sorry. So that was a very touching final shot, but of course that's not the end because this is a Marvel movie. We have
a very, 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 very strange post-credit scene in which, Yelena is visiting Natasha's grave. Which, first of all, how does she have a grave? I don't think they went back to Vormir for her body.
No, it's just probably just a headstone.
I think it's just a headstone. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what was it? Christina Valentina Allegra de Fontaine.
Valentina
Christina Allegra de Fontaine. And Julia Lee-Dreyfus's character shows up. And I was like, hey, Yelena, I have another target for you if you want to avenge the person who killed your sister. And then she shows a picture of Hawkeye in his Ronin gear. And I assume that's setting up the Hawkeye Disney Plus series.
Yeah.
Which I guess will follow not only him training Kate Bishop, but also his time as a Ronin. Or doing something as Ronin.
It might be a split track, before and after.
Yeah.
Like before and after Endgame. But now you see what I was referring to when I said that there's something in this movie that will almost certainly set up a plot point in Hawkeye. So that was it. So yeah, and well, can I say great job on the recap.
Thank you.
We have a lot to talk about, so let's dive in. So right off the bat, just some general notes about things. First thing I wanted to mention is, I mean, of course, Scarlett Johansson is Scarlett Johansson. She is fantastic. She's always, done such an incredible job making this character her own. And I mean, despite how the character of Black Widow has kind of perennially been a side character and a supporting character in bigger movies, Scarlett Johansson, through her performance, has always done such an incredible job of making that character one of the most interesting and intriguing in the MCU, despite not always getting a ton to work with. And so it goes without saying she's tremendous in this. I mean, she does a great job. I could argue pretty easily, in fact, well, not easily, because every movie she's in, she's done a great job. But this one, I think, is the crowning achievement of what Scarlett Johansson has done with this character. And it's not hard to see why. In interviews promoting the movie, she said that doing Black Widow has really provided a sense of closure for her time as the character that she didn't really get after Endgame. And it makes a lot of sense, because now we can finally examine some of these really Black Widow specific parts of the MCU. And so Scarlett Johansson is great, but I want to really give a lot of credit to the supporting cast, specifically Florence Pugh as Yelena. She did a fantastic job. David Harbour as Alexei, incredible. I mean, he was just having so much fun in that role, and it shows. I mean, it's especially considering how, his last, and he's done stuff in between, but, his last really high-profile role was, of course, playing Hopper in Stranger Things, where he was pursuing Russian spies in season 3. Now he becomes this Russian super soldier, and that's great. And he's just a pitch perfect Alexei. Rachel Weisz as Melina, she does a fantastic job, and also Ray Winston as Dreykov. He was really, really good. And I've heard people saying after the fact that, his Russian accent was kind of lacking, but honestly, I'm sure, like, if you're an actual Russian speaker, that might pull you out. But if not, then I didn't notice it, the accent being an issue at all. I think he did a great job, and he brought such a quiet menace to that character. It's definitely not like some of the more bombastic villains we've seen in the MCU. I mean, it was very quiet, but you could tell that this was a dangerous guy, and it wasn't because of what he personally could do, but it's because of the organization he was the head of. And so he did a fantastic job. So outstanding job to the ensemble cast of this. We've had Marvel movies where the ensemble cast, it's good, it's fine, but you're not like writing letters home about it. One example that comes to mind is I hate to say it because we pick on this movie all the time, but Captain Marvel is I think is an example where the ensemble cast didn't really do a ton outside of Samuel L. Jackson, who is he's Samuel L. Jackson, so of course
he's always good.
Yeah, he's always good, but even like the Ant-Man movies have a pretty good supporting cast. They're fun. Michael
they
Douglas,
have a great supporting cast.
And that cast is fun. But yeah, this one was for a solo movie. This was a fantastic supporting cast, fantastic ensemble cast. So
who was your MVP?
Ooh, that is tough because there's a lot of worthy contenders. As I said, Scarlett Johansson was fantastic. So, she definitely is someone who deserves it, but I think that just in terms of degree that they exceeded my expectations and became one of my favorite characters, I might have to say I don't know. It's like I'm going back and forth between Alexei or Yelena.
I mean, they're both so much fun. Yeah, I do like that Yelena is going to be a returning character.
Yeah. No, we're going to see a lot more of Yelena. Really, this movie was as much about examining Black Widow as it was essentially setting up her replacement or her successor, which is fine because Yeah, because I mean, which is fine because it wasn't jarring at all. It definitely felt like it's an earned succession. So I'm excited to see more of Yelena. I think I may have to. I'm gonna say Yelena. I really want to say either Scarlett Johansson or David Harbour as Alexei, but I think Florence Pugh really knocked it out of the park. She not only had some of the funniest lines, but she also had some of the best action moments. She was very sarcastic, which I appreciated. She was
She
constantly
had great
mocking.
delivery.
Fantastic
She was
delivery.
like the banter was always so much better with her in it.
Yeah, I mean, she was constantly mocking Natasha for being a poser because, of course, she has all
Yeah,
these iconic
I
poses.
feel so
Uh,
disgusting.
yeah, you never doubted that she was just as lethal as Natasha was. Like,
Oh yeah,
she was dangerous. And just all of the great character moments and the family moments were great. Reflecting on their upbringing, which was essentially just a facade as part of an espionage operation. And saying that for you had an easier time coping with the facade being broken because you had already experienced the Red Room. So for you this was just returning to the bad old days. But for me, this family that we had is the only family that I had ever known. I was so young, I couldn't tell the difference. And that was really powerful. So I think I'm going to give it to Yelena. Lots of worthy contenders, but I think Yelena was the one who I think proved the most to me. Like Scarlett Johansson didn't have anything left else to prove, but Yelena knocked it out of the park, and
yeah.
Florence Pugh knocked it out of the park. So, how about you? Well, who was your MVP?
So for the sake of not saying a protagonist, I
Mm.
actually have to say Dreykov
Mm.
because
Good
he
choice.
was a great menacing silent power.
Yes,
Have you seen any of the HBO Chernobyl series?
I've seen all of it. Yeah, it's incredible.
He feels straight out of that.
Oh yeah.
Straight out of that, like, kind of old Soviet bureaucratic government, but
Mm.
like, kind of despicable,
Mm.
but like very powerful. And he had like this really creepy element to him, with the amount of control he had over not women but girls.
Mm.
It was like Marvel's had a lot of really bad villains, like evil villains, but this is the first one to me that felt truly like disgusting and despicable.
Yeah, I mean,
Like
there
I
was.
wanted to see him die so badly.
Yeah, easily one of the slimiest villains that we've
Yes,
gotten.
very, very
and
slimy.
and his performance, and the reason why it was so good, and this is why I think yours is a great pick, is because I mean, it wasn't just what he was saying, and it wasn't just his agenda, but it was also when he's physically moving around that office in the Red Room, and he's constantly invading Natasha's personal space
Yeah,
because
and like
he
hands
knows
all
that she
over.
can't do anything about it. Like that was, that really kind of got to the core of what that character is. And so
Yeah,
Ray Winstone, a fantastic job as the villain, as Dreykov.
yeah. That he was amazing. That was really,
Yeah.
really cool.
So definitely two very deserving MVPs, but the ensemble cast overall was great. So
Should we?
first,
You said you wanted to bring up the pheromone scene. You had something to say about
oh
that
yeah, well
while
yeah,
we're talking about Dreykov.
I've got kind of notes throughout the whole film, so we're going to talk about that. But just to start off, I want to start at the very beginning with the opening scene. I thought that this cold open was one of the best we've gotten. It was really very, very good. I'm like comparing. I'm like thinking back to other Marvel movies we've had. Like as far as cold opens go, I think it's got to be top five. Like Infinity War is the one that comes to mind immediately. But other than that, I mean, how many have been as memorable as this one? I can't say that many.
Not just the
Um,
cold open, but the title sequence as well.
yeah.
It was really cool. It felt kind of like a kind of true crime,
Oh, absolutely.
almost TV series feel to it. It was really
Yeah.
well done.
Yeah, which I'm glad you said TV because I mean this whole sequence was essentially it was essentially The Americans, that show that was on, I forget if it was on FX or one of those networks for a while. Very good show, which is, pretty much the same premise. These top Soviet intelligence agents in deep cover, kind of secretly siphoning away information while they're, just living in suburbia and unassuming normal lives. And I thought it was brilliant, just the subterfuge of that whole thing, because at first, you're not even sure what you're looking at, because of course this is still, Natasha when she's a kid, so we don't recognize her. And, you're observing this family, you're not sure who they are. I mean, of course, because you've seen the trailers, but if you hadn't seen the trailers, you would think this is just, you wouldn't know who these people are.
Actually, to be fair, when the movie started, I actually thought it was another trailer. I thought we were still in the trailers.
I mean,
I was like, wait, but didn't the Marvel sequence just play?
I mean, it could have been. It could have been. And, just watching the tension ratchet up as, Melina realizes the gravity of what's happening, how that they're going to have to, within 30 minutes, abandon their entire life in America and, escape. And, just how kinetic that whole sequence was, literally they can't take anything, just load the girls into the car and drive to the airfield. And, at first they're not sure if they're being followed, and then they definitely are being followed. And then, as you said, I mean, that whole escape sequence on the plane as they take off is fantastic. Then this is an adjective that I'm going to use a lot in this review, is kinetic. This movie, I mean, it very much has that, it shares that great quality that Winter Soldier and Civil War had, which is very kinetic, very much in the Jason Bourne style, and the James Bond style as well, I would argue. It's not hugely reliant on CGI. It's very much gritty, grounded, realistic, hand-to-hand stuff. It's all within the realm of reason. Especially in that opening sequence, there is nothing in that is outside of Alexei, kind of showing off some super soldier abilities. That is outside of the realm of something that could happen in the real world. And so I love that opening sequence. I thought it was very fitting that they escaped to Cuba because, of course, not only is Cuba very close to America, but this is in the immediate aftermath of the collapse of the Soviet Union, of which Cuba was a close ally. So, it makes sense that they would escape there. Although, admittedly, it's a small plot hole. I mean, it's only really a plot hole for people that, like us, who overthink these things. If you were like in just a twin jet propeller plane flying from Ohio to Cuba, and like SHIELD and the US government was trying to stop you, like they would force you down long before you got from the Midwest to the Caribbean past Florida.
I'm just wondering if you can even get from Ohio to Cuba in that small of a plane, because those don't carry that much fuel.
That's true. It's true. Yeah, that might be.
I feel like you'd have to land like, I don't know, somewhere between New Jersey and Florida, just to refuel, and then. I mean, I'm not an airplane guy. I don't actually know, but.
Yeah, no, but it's a good point. I mean, it's hard to tell, but even if it could, that would have been at the very limit of its range, effectively, if it was fully fueled. But yeah, small plot hole. They in real life, the Air Force probably would have forced that plane down long before they got very far, or SHIELD as well, because we'll talk about that. But yeah, they get to Cuba, and as you said, the title sequence was very strong. And speaking of how kind of gritty and ground level it is, what I liked about it is just the, you felt the menace and the terror of what the Red Room was really doing, because it was abducting these little girls from all over the world, which makes sense, because if you're going to embed them all over the world, they can't be like, super, like super Slavic Russians. Yeah. And so they're getting these little girls from everywhere, just either orphans or just straight up taking them from their parents. And, they like load them in shipping containers and send them back to Russia. And they, just watching that sequence where all the girls are coming out, I mean, it was. And the director has said this, it was deliberately meant to evoke very real images that we've seen of like human trafficking, a very real life horrific thing.
Or even like the kids in the cages.
Yeah.
At the border.
Exactly. And so, it really it did a great job of just demonstrating, how terrifying of an experience this would be if you were a child who would just, abducted from your home knowingly or unknowingly, and now, you're going to spend the rest of your life essentially training to be a super assassin and then being a super assassin.
Yeah.
So that was very effective. And so, yeah, I wanted to give a lot of props for that. Quite possibly the best sequence in the movie. And that's not a diss because, I mean, the movie, as I said, overall is an 8 out of 10 for me. But that opening was very strong, 9 or 10 out of 10. So moving forward, yeah, so talking about Rick Wilson, and this is, he's played by O.T. Fag Benley, who's also in The Handmaid's Tale and some other things. Really good actor. Almost to a fault. I'm not sure that you needed an actor of his caliber for this role because it's really kind of a small thing. He's just Natasha's contact who is able to supply her with things from time to time. The fact that he can get a Quinjet at the end of the movie is kind of stupid, and maybe it's even really stupid, and they just kind of hand wave it away.
I thought the Avengers were the only ones with Quinjets.
Yeah,
I thought that was like a Tony Stark kind of invented.
Yeah, it's kind of stupid how he can get that, but I mean, okay, I'll accept that he's just got a lot of connections and he can get things. That is his job. But I don't know if you needed an actor of his caliber for that. But I mean, then again, this is the MCU where they literally cast Matt Damon to play a bit part in a one-time joke in Thor Ragnarok. So it's not beyond
Although
them.
Apparently he'll be back.
Yeah, that's true.
Love and Thunder.
Yeah, he'll be back when they do the same joke again in the next movie. So it's not like it's not unlike the MCU to burn really high profile actors on roles that don't mean much. So it's okay, fine. But moving along. In the Budapest safe house, two things. Well, the first is just a visual thing. I thought it was really cool. First of all, you could tell in that altercation between Black Widow and Yelena that the two of them had ample opportunities where if they really wanted to hurt each other, they could, but they don't, because even though they're not exactly on the best terms at the moment, they still care about one another too much to actually hurt one another. This is pretty much just them trying to demonstrate who's superior. Particularly Yelena, because it's the classic big sister little sister complex, or big brother little brother. You want to prove, especially for the younger sibling, that you're the best. So so that was cool. And also the visual of the widows when they infiltrate the building and they reach the ceiling and they kind of come down on those ropes in the ceiling. I thought that was a really cool visual because, of course, they are Black Widows, evocative of spider. And that was kind of similar to what a spider would do. So very cool. They escape into the Budapest metro where Natasha and Hawkeye, Clint, on their fabled Budapest mission back in the day, they hid out for like 3 days while they were being pursued. And when they mentioned that, it made me realize this movie was supposed to deliver on answering the question, what did happen in Budapest? Because that's one of the top things that people have been asking about ever since the Avengers came out in 2012, is what was this Budapest mission that Clint and Natasha keep referencing? And I was hoping we would actually get to see that here. We heard a little bit about what it was about. It was essentially the last thing Natasha had to do before she gained her freedom. But I wanted to see more of that beyond just, her blowing up Dreykov, or she thinks she's blown up Dreykov.
I'm gonna disagree with you there, because I feel like if they went ahead and actually did some kind of flashback or had shown specifically what happened, it would have left a lot of people really unhappy. I think it's for the same reason that, like, we always go back to this, but with the Last Jedi, when we see Luke Skywalker, and he's kind of an old man, it's like, well, that's not how I imagined Luke Skywalker to be. That's not what I wanted him to have gone through. And I feel like when you put a visual to it, you kind of take that away from people. So I think just kind of leaving little hints here and there was enough. Because that's also part of the joke, too, is that you never really know what happened in Budapest.
Right.
What happens in Budapest stays in Budapest.
I guess so. Yeah. So I mean, I guess we got the most critical part of information about what happened in Budapest. But but I do take your meaning. Like, chances are, whatever your headcanon is about the Budapest mission will probably be better than what they can show. The important takeaway is that, and this is another, call back to a line in the Avengers, when Loki is kind of taunting Natasha and asking, can you really wipe out that much red, including Dreykov's daughter? Yeah. So now
I had forgotten about that until I watched like an Easter egg summary video. I was like, oh shit, like they really did go all the way back.
Yeah, and so I'm glad we at least got that piece of the puzzle. And you can, I mean, and you could tell why, this movie, not only does it literally explain a lot of Natasha's backstory, but it emotionally explains so much of why her past is so tortured and why she just is so loath to talk about it. Because, I mean, kidnapped as a child, forcibly sterilized, brainwashed into being an assassin, have to murder a child to gain your freedom. Like, that would really mess you up, and you wouldn't want to revisit that chapter of your life. So, it did a great job of emotionally filling in those gaps for Black Widow as well. Again, the supporting cast was great. Yelena, checking in with Alexei is great. Just hanging out with him. So the next thing is Alexei's claim that he fought Captain America in the 80s. Of course, our Captain America, as we've known him in the MCU, was still frozen in the Arctic Circle from, 1945 to 2011, 2012, pretty much. So it couldn't have been that Captain America. But as you mentioned, as we've seen and we've uncovered recently in series like Falcon and Winter Soldier, there are the U.S. government produced at least one more Captain America, or at least a version of Captain America in Isaiah Bradley. Yep. And it does not sound so improbable to me that there may have been a version of Captain America, a super soldier going by the Captain America moniker, who we have not seen yet, who was active in the 80s, who may have fought Red Guardian. So that's just a possibility. I've heard that theorized that there may have been a Captain America who was active in the 80s that Alexei may have fought, kind of like how Red Guardian was acting as a spy. That Captain America could have been like an undercover spy, which is why he's not famous. But like doing like secret missions, in the Soviet Union and elsewhere. It's a possibility.
It's a possibility, but it also doesn't really make sense, because if Captain America is acting kind of subtly as a spy, like, why would he be donning the Stars and Stripes? Like, that is such a bold uniform. And I think, yes, Isaiah Bradley was kind of, given the super soldier serum and was like, kind of the only successful replication of that serum.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he ever was given the uniform and was told, like, you're Captain America now.
Maybe I should clarify. It's Red
you
Guardian.
Think it's someone else, right?
Yeah, I know.
Not Isaiah Bradley, but some other.
No, not Isaiah. Well, because we know Isaiah Bradley. He will actually. No, it couldn't have been Isaiah, because he got broken out of prison in the 70s, but he didn't go back to being Captain America after that. So it couldn't have been Isaiah. So I think I should clarify. Maybe Alexei's making the Captain America part, but it could have been another American super soldier who was active in the 80s. And then Alexei is just kind of buffing up the story by saying it was Captain America. Yeah. So it's a possibility. I mean, is it more likely that Alexei's just full of shit? Yeah, probably, but it's a possibility.
Although, given it was the Cold War, I would not put it past America to kind of create a fake Captain America. And be like, oh, our Captain America isn't frozen in ice. What are you talking about? He's right here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm immediately put in mind of like, like kind of like in a Watchmen situation where, in Watchmen they had Dr. Manhattan, who was kind of, America's secret weapon that, no other country could possibly possess, and that's what kind of made us preeminent in the world. It could have been kind of similar to that, where it's like, it's as much a deterrent and propaganda tool as an actual just super soldier who can go around and do super soldier things.
Yeah.
So. And of course, Watchmen is another Vietnam era Cold War story, so it could have been similar to that. Um, yeah. Oh, also, I have something important I want to say about, speaking of theories, about the opening sequence and what they were doing when they were undercover. But yeah, moving along, like you said, it was really, it was really, it was fascinating to see just the extent to which Melina's mind control was effective, to the point where, like, and it was an extended sequence of this pig just like choking for like 30 seconds, like to the point where I thought, oh, they're gonna release this tension at some point. No, like this pig is literally choking.
We'll get passed out.
Yeah, like for almost a minute, until like literally the final second before it just asphyxiates and dies. That was fascinating. To see. And also, the movie doesn't try to, and this is what I really appreciate about it, is that it takes a very mature view of its protagonist. It's not saying that any of these people are morally clean, or everything is washed away because they do heroic things. They reference and make jokes at several junctures about how Natasha and Yelena have killed many people.
Yeah.
Yes, they were mind controlled, but that doesn't wash their hands of it. And especially in
That's
Natasha's
not really
case,
going to work in court. Yeah.
exactly, especially in Natasha's case, she was very much acting of her own accord when she, killed Dreykov's daughter, in the course of assassinating Dreykov. And also, Melina, as the person who created the mind control that makes the Red Room possible, she's not exonerated by the end of the movie, even though she is a good guy, so to speak. And I appreciated that. It's a very mature kind of angle to take on these good but morally gray characters.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that quite a lot.
No one
Um,
who's good is ever truly good, and no one bad is ever truly bad.
there you go. There you go. So, yeah, and so also again, yeah, I loved that gag where Alexei, he just gets punctured by 2 dozen sedative darts. Straight out of The Incredibles, but I loved it. Absolutely, yeah, fantastic. Um, and yes, okay, so let's talk about the fact that the Red Room is a sky base. I I did kind of roll my eyes when I saw that the Red Room was a sky base. I understood it when I saw it because, of course, we saw that sequence in the trailer where Natasha and Taskmaster are falling, just
Yeah.
free falling, there's all this debris everywhere. So it's like, okay, I can see how that happened because that made no sense in the trailer at all. But I didn't love the fact that the Red Room was a sky base. Least of all because it just doesn't make sense, as you pointed out. Because yeah, no, it doesn't make sense. I don't know
How do you
how.
keep it like the helicarrier? Sure, it can go airborne, but it's only airborne for short periods of time before it lands back down in the water or like refuels.
Yeah,
This
not just
building, this
has
building
been
doesn't come down.
yeah, it's been flying
It
for
feels
20
like a
years.
space station in orbit, sure, but like this thing is constantly running
Yeah, and
like
and the
a
notion
half
that
dozen
it's
jets and propellers.
yeah, and the notion that it's hidden by clouds is laughable. Like
Yeah.
it's you would see it
Those
from the
satellites.
surface. Yeah, I mean, like it's there's no way that this is a secret base. So yeah, that's laughable. But even putting aside the fact that it makes absolutely no sense, and especially for a covert organization to have their headquarters be an incredibly conspicuous sky base, yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's stupid. But also, just from the standpoint of, it just felt like we've done this before. I don't really want a sky base. Like it's very reminiscent of the helicarrier and other things that we've had in the past. And not just Marvel, but just superhero movies in general. It felt very typical for a
Sky
movie that
high.
Yeah, Sky High. Oh my god, that's a throwback. Sky High. Yeah, so it felt very typical for a movie that thus far had done a great job breaking the mold. For in terms of MCU and just comic book movies in general. So yeah, didn't love that. It's stupid that it's a sky base. It makes no sense, especially for a spy organization. But anyway, it's a cool visual and it can fall out of the sky. So, and that's how we can have our third act. Yes. So, yeah, as you said, Dreykov, and as we were talking about Dreykov, great villain. Loved how menacing he was. Very slimy, very kind of greasy character,
Yeah.
And yeah, Ray Winston did a great job. It felt like it was pretty hokey how he died, like Yelena sticks the beam into the rotor of the helicopter, and it explodes and it blows her off to safety, and it just
Because we
kills
already
everyone.
know that explosion can't kill Dreykov.
Yeah,
He survived the first one.
Yeah, like if anything, just explain it that, well, the rotor's disabled and the sky station is falling out of the sky, so he'll just be killed on impact. Just have the visual of the helicopter falling, boom, puff, smoke, done. But no, that it explodes in midair, and there's like the slow-mo shot of everyone just getting incinerated. And yeah, it felt kind of hokey as a way of killing the villain, but that's fine. We've seen worse villain deaths, so sure. And yeah, Taskmaster is pardon me, Dreykov's daughter. And so Natasha, she doesn't want to hurt her, and definitely doesn't want to kill her, because now she has a chance to kind of right a wrong from her past by saving her. And and that was good. And so, overall on Taskmaster, the reveal that it's Dreykov's daughter, I thought it was fine. I think that as twists go, it it would have been silly if it ended up being somebody that we had known from the past, unless it was like a really minor character. So it had to be an entirely new character to Black Widow. And the fact that they could connect it to a throwaway line from the Avengers and then retroactively give that line meaning was good. So I did like that.
I think, okay, so I didn't mind the fact that Taskmaster was Dreykov's daughter, but I think it would have been cool if Taskmaster didn't have an identity outside of just being Taskmaster. Because that's what makes a villain scary is that kind of unknown. And like having this person that can replicate anything you do and throw that back at you. And like, but you have no idea who they are. You don't even know if that's an actual person. Like maybe it's a robot in there. Like that would have been really scary. And seeing Taskmaster at the beginning was really scary. And then it's like, oh, this daughter with basically a female Two-Face. It's like, I mean, okay. And but the really disappointing thing for me was the fact that they had another vial of the red dust and they sprayed it onto Taskmaster, and then she apparently was also brainwashed and was now like wanted to help the other widows and didn't want to support Dreykov anymore. And it's like, I feel like that would have been so much more compelling if she wasn't brainwashed and that she was on his side by choice and saw Natasha as the bad guy because she tried to blow up a 6-year-old girl.
Yeah. So, no, that's true. Yeah.
I think that could have been really interesting. And it's like, that adds a lot of heartbreak where you're trying to make it up to this person who just cannot forgive you, no matter how hard you try. And also, I was kind of hoping that Val would recruit Taskmaster, not just Yelena. I think I really want to see Taskmaster return because that's a really cool character.
Absolutely. And it's I agree with both of your proposals. I think that Taskmaster, it would have been more effective if either it was just Taskmaster as a standalone identity, or if it was Dreykov's daughter acting by choice, because God knows she would have motive to
Yeah.
hate Natasha personally without any sort of mind control. So I think you're right on both those counts. I think that would have been better. But for what it was a fine twist. I think it was effective. It did the job. And, most importantly, it left Taskmaster alive so we could see her again in the future. I think she's kind of added to the pantheon of villains who, well, the pantheon. I mean, there's only really a handful who have been successfully redeemed by the end of their movie. But I think that, I think did a good job of it. Very similar to what they did with Ghost and Ant-Man.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first character that came to mind. Where it's like, the villain was redeemed, but did they need to be? Did that really add anything?
Yeah.
Kind of felt like a way out, but
Exactly. So, I mean, of course, like Loki ended up being redeemed, but that was over the course of several movies.
Yeah.
But
and then one episode.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, even then, not really. It still took them a while, but
yeah. And also, let's not forget, Gamora was originally an enemy as well. She was originally a villain, but not the primary villain in that movie. Yeah. So I guess that doesn't really count.
So towards the beginning of our recording, you said, this movie was good, but you had questions as to whether it was necessary.
Yes. And I
want you to expand on that if you can.
Yeah, well,
I have my own thoughts too.
Yeah, because I want to ask you that same question, but first, just two last notes I had.
Sure.
One for the post-credit scene, and one going back to the very beginning. So for the post-credit scene, I really liked it, and it's shameless, but I don't mind that it's shameless, and I'll tell you why. Because back in 2019, when they were first unveiling their whole Phase 4, plan, their whole Phase 4 layout, Kevin Feige said that when they were introducing the concept of, Marvel and Disney Plus, they said that you would not need to watch the Disney Plus series to understand what's going on in the movies. The movies would still be the flagships, and the series would just be supplemental to that. But of course, at the time, we all knew that was bullshit. And of course,
that's a WandaVision.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, of course, we knew that wasn't going to be that way, then. And of course, it ends up being true now, because this is now the first time where we've seen a direct cross-pollination, not from the movies to the shows, but from the shows now into the movies. Because, of course, we first saw Val in Falcon and Winter Soldier, and now she's popping up here to recruit her second individual. Maybe it's for the Thunderbolts, maybe it's for another team up, but a Dark Avengers or whatever. But now we know that Val has John Walker on her side, and now she is it doesn't seem like she's partnered with Yelena. It seems like she's got something on Yelena that is, she's coercing her to work for her.
I don't know. From the language I heard, it sounded like she was using Yelena as a, contract killer, like a hired gun.
Yeah.
She was like, I have another target for you. I don't know, though.
Yeah, the reason I say this is because I have a hard time believing, based on everything we had just seen, that Yelena would be doing this for Val by choice. So I think that there must be some reason why Yelena has to work for Val. Because otherwise, she just got her freedom. So why would she go back to being a contract killer after?
Because that's the only skill set she has, but she has an opportunity to work for the good side instead of the bad, or what she thinks is the good side.
I suppose.
But, she could be being manipulated again.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Is I think Val must have some leverage on Yelena. And so, yes, is it absolutely, and of course, by referencing Hawkeye, which is coming out later this year, the post-credit is essentially just an advertisement saying, sign up for Disney Plus so you can know either what's happening now or what will happen, with this character that you just met.
Joke's on you, though. We both have Disney Plus and neither of us understand.
but there you go though. So it wasn't shameless. Yes. Was it essentially a Disney Plus advertisement? Yes, but it was good. And honestly, like Julia Louis-Dreyfus, I am so glad
Amazing.
that
I
she's
can't wait
just
to
gonna
see more of her
yeah,
character.
like she is just she is just such it just I know it's a cliche, but I cannot help but think of her as Selena Meyer as she's doing Val, because I mean it's essentially it's very kind of snarky and sarcastic, but also authoritative, and it's essentially just like having a dark Selena Meyer who's going around like recruiting all of these these misfits in the MCU. And I can't wait to see more of that, because Julia Louis-Dreyfus is fantastic. So, seeing Val was great, and admittedly, yes, the post-credit scene did make me more excited for Hawkeye than I was. So, mission accomplished. But yes, going back to the very beginning, this is the biggest kind of theory takeaway that really stood out to me coming out of this movie. Was I read a really fascinating theory about the mission, the undercover mission with Lexi and Melina and the family. They were in Ohio because they were supposed to be infiltrating the North Institute, which is this, research auxiliary of S.H.I.E.L.D., essentially. It's a S.H.I.E.L.D. division that's, about research. And, Alexei works for the North Institute, and he's supposed to steal this information and bring it back to the Red Room, because now it's just the Red Room because the Soviet Union collapsed 4 years prior.
Yeah.
And his cover is blown, therefore the whole family's cover is blown, and that's why they have to escape. And as we learn later on, the information that they stole from the North Institute, Melina then used to perfect the mind control regimen that they then used on all the Black Widows. So here's what's fascinating about this. What do we know about S.H.I.E.L.D. in this period of time? What's going on within S.H.I.E.L.D.? Operation Insight. The Hydra infiltration of S.H.I.E.L.D. They're in the background, pulling the strings, controlling everything, waiting until the goal of Operation Insight is to essentially become so powerful and so ubiquitous and get S.H.I.E.L.D. to be so powerful that when they take it over, the world can do nothing to stop them, and they can just reveal themselves to be Hydra the whole time. That would be a slightly less kooky song, Hydra all along. But that's essentially what Operation Insight was. And so what would Hydra, what would make Operation Insight, what would bring it just within an inch of success? What would they love more than anything else? A literal formula which would allow you to just control the minds of a massive amount of people. Instead of just ruling through fear and intimidation, what if everyone was just compliant to begin with? And that's what they were researching at the North Institute under the guise of S.H.I.E.L.D., but it was really Hydra through Operation Insight. And the Red Room wants this, not because they want to take over the world, but just because they want to be able to control their Black Widows and essentially have them act as robots. And so when Alexei and the family escape with this information, that's all of the research that Hydra was working on this mind control just up in smoke. And, and now it's in the hands of the Red Room, where, I mean, obviously the Red Room was not using it for good. They were using it to mind control thousands of people, but it's nothing like what Hydra would have done with that information if they had continued working on it. And so perhaps intentionally, perhaps unintentionally, the Red Room in the 90s essentially prevented Hydra from taking over the world much sooner. Because if they had perfected mind control, it would have been game over. And I think that's fascinating, just as a subterfuge kind of side plot point, because, of course, Hydra is, the Nazi remnants that survived the war, and the Red Room is the intelligence KGB elements that survived the collapse of the Soviet Union. Obviously, the Eastern Front of World War II was, the most consequential land front of the war. These were two entities that were desperately trying to destroy each other. And in the end, it seems like it was the Soviet Union and the KGB that got the last laugh, because even though Hydra survived the war, they couldn't truly realize Operation Insight without that research from the North Institute. So, I thought that was a fascinating theory, and just kind of the Nazi-Soviet competition, to put it kindly, taking on this other angle, 50 years in the future, because it makes sense, if the Hydra elements of Shield had finished working on mind control, would have been game over for everyone. So yeah, so the Red Room kind of unintentionally saved the world, or maybe intentionally. Maybe they knew about the Hydra infiltration because their whole business is knowing everything. So it's a possibility.
Huh. I like that. I do like that because it just shows how complicated and messy like history and just war can be. And of course, America is just kind of fucked over other ways. So.
Yeah, and honestly, I would say it's even likely that the Red Room was aware about Operation Insight because, their whole business is having highly placed widows all over the world. So it stands to reason that they would have widows next to, highly placed people in the U.S. government and SHIELD. So
yeah,
they probably figured it out. And that was just the extra cherry on top of stealing that information. Why they sent their very own Red Guardian, the champion of the Soviet Union, personally undercover to get the information. So I read that theory and I just thought that was brilliant. That wasn't verbally confirmed in the movie, but there's enough evidence that you could put it together.
I don't think the movie even explains why they were in Ohio in the first place.
Just because that's where the North Institute was.
But did they even explain that they were, infiltrating the North Institute?
Yeah. That's where Alexei was working.
Mm-hmm.
And and presumably the files were what he had in his briefcase, which is why they had to leave so quickly. Because after it was discovered that those files were gone, they went on high alert. They put it together. So yeah, so it's an interesting theory. I really love that theory. I think I think that's entirely possible, if not plausible. So
yeah, either way, it's a good headcanon.
Absolutely. And also, just as a coincidental thing, the cold open takes place 1995, is the same year as Captain Marvel does, which is a story about another SHIELD infiltration, but by Skrulls. So maybe that's a parallel, maybe not. But I just thought that was interesting that this is the same year as the events of Captain Marvel are happening. So
the takeaway I get from that is that SHIELD is really bad at its job.
Yeah, look, they're too busy with their own helicarriers and sky bases, and all this other crap to worry about what's going on in their own backyard.
Yeah.
So yeah, just thought that was interesting. Wanted to spotlight that. But to your point, because this is kind of the critical question that I wanted us to answer is, Black Widow was good, but was it necessary? This is the first MCU film that has been, it's entirely a flashback. It doesn't push the story forward. So, what did you think about how necessary this film was?
I have a lot to say, so I actually want you to go first.
Okay, well,
I'm gonna go off on some tangents.
Well, I'll say I do think that this movie was necessary. On top of just being very good, does it not really push the story forward in any major way? No, but it does push the story forward in its own small ways, because now we have this whole cast of characters that can come back. I am sure Red Guardian will come back. Maybe Melina will come back, maybe not, but Yelena will definitely come back, as we saw. She's essentially going to be the next Black Widow of sorts. And so, it does put those pieces in place that will very much factor into the story later on. And just in general, I think it was necessary, because I think that there are a lot of MCU fans who would have been rightly betrayed if, after 10 years of begging for a Black Widow movie, it just never materialized. It's the Scarlett Johansson and that character are just too good, and the backstory is just too hazy to not examine it in some way. And, you know, I'm glad that we could finally answer a lot of those questions and fill in a lot of those gaps. You know, Black Widow retroactively improved on a character that was already excellent. And the only thing that's a shame is that it took so long to happen, because if we had gotten this movie back in the actual, you know, time after Civil War, if this had come out in like 2016, 2017, I think it would have been even better, much better, actually, because it would have been, you know, sooner, and it would have been, you know, it would have been more relevant to the time period it would have been coming out in, you know. You know, if this movie had come out, maybe not directly after Civil War, because they might be a little bit too similar, but if it had come out in like 2017, I think that could have worked out really well. So my only gripe about it is I think that this movie was very good and necessary, but if it had come out sooner, it would have been even better. I think 4 or 5 years ago would have been the ideal time. But I'm very glad it exists. It retroactively brings a lot of closure to a beloved character. And, you know, the other question, because of course, you know, people will draw parallels also to Captain Marvel, because that's the other female, you know, headlining, you know, superhero film we've gotten, you know, Captain Marvel and now this. And people were saying, well, wouldn't it be better if Black Widow was the first female-led MCU film instead of Captain Marvel? But I don't know if that's true. I think that, you know, I think that if, because obviously, you know, we talk about how, you know, wouldn't it be good if Captain Marvel was better? But just assuming that both movies stay exactly as they are, I think that Black Widow is actually enhanced by coming after Captain Marvel, because I think that they're two very different kinds of movies taking place in very different corners of the MCU. And I think that Captain Marvel provides a contrast to Black Widow and vice versa. I think that if Black Widow had come out and then Captain Marvel, I think Captain Marvel would have been even more disappointing than it was when it was released.
Yeah, actually, because I was gonna say, like, you know, whether I don't know if this film is necessary to the MCU timeline specifically, but just as a movie, to have as a cultural icon, it is very necessary.
Mm-hmm.
I thought as kind of a, you know, movie that deals with, you know, female empowerment and kind of giving us, you know, strong women characters, this movie did a much better job of that than Captain Marvel. But actually, I didn't even think about that, you know, because we saw Captain Marvel, we were like, okay, this is not great as like a, you know, feminist movie. This is just kind of hitting you over the head with this message rather than giving you a good movie.
It's just kind of, it's a very mediocre origin story.
Yeah, but watching Black Widow after that, you're like, okay, this is a really good movie, and it has a really good, strong message.
Yeah.
But if it was the other way around, Black Widow would have been really good, but then you have Captain Marvel, which, you know, you said would be even more of a disappointment, which I agree with. And I think it would have also kind of dragged down Black Widow, kind of dragged it through the mud a little bit.
Yeah, and also I think that, you know, it would have been, I think there would have been a lot more scrutiny of Black Widow if it had come out 4 years ago, say, because another element that we have to talk about is the external element of just when this movie is coming out. You know, it's post-pandemic, you know, the first MCU film back in theaters after a 2-year absence. You know, I think that if this had just been a movie that comes out in a, you know, a 3-movie release cycle, like as we've seen in the last several years,
it wouldn't have done as well.
Yeah, I think it would have been under a lot more scrutiny, and I don't think it would have done as well. And especially if it was the first female headlining superhero, you know, MCU film, I think that, you know, I think that would have just been, I think that it would have caught a lot of flack that it didn't deserve, because ultimately it doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it's very competent, and it's and that's what makes it very good. But if you put this up next to, you know, 2 other MCU films that are releasing in any given year, let's say if it is 2017, let's say, you know, instead of Spider-Man Homecoming and, you know, Thor Ragnarok, you know, let's say it was Spider-Man Homecoming, this, and Thor Ragnarok.
Well, let's put it chronologically. Say it's coming between Civil War and Infinity War.
Yeah,
so that's where it would have been slotted.
Yeah, so in that space of time, we got Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Spider-Man Homecoming, Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther. you know, you know, tough competition.
Yeah.
So, I think if it had just come out in the middle of that, I think that it would have caught a lot of flack that it didn't deserve. But it's coming out now, and it's such a welcome return for the MCU into the theater environment. It's been so long, 2 years, it just, I think that, and because we have movies like Captain Marvel to contrast it against, I think all of these things were working in its favor in terms of how we're talking about it now. So, of course, if Captain Marvel was a better movie, then sure, anything is possible. But if both movies just stay exactly as they are, I think it served Black Widow very well to be where it is.
Do you think that this movie will kind of serve as almost as a blueprint or a good example for, the next Captain Marvel and, Miss Marvel and the Marvels? And
I think elements of it, yes. I think the main thing is that this movie was, on the whole, yes, there were some stupid things like the sky base, Red Room, but like every MCU film has nitpicks.
yeah.
I think that the key is strong writing and strong direction as well. Kate Shortland, the director, did a fantastic job. This movie, we talk about a lot of visual sameness with MCU movies, not a problem here. It felt, again, very Jason Bourne, very kinetic. It did not look like a, your standard MCU film. So great job by Kate Shortland, the director, and the writing. The writing is key. One of the two writers on this was the WandaVision writer. I forget her name, but the writer, the writer who did WandaVision also did this, and it shows. When you have strong writing, you set yourself up excellently for a strong film. And Captain Marvel, as we've said in the past, Captain Marvel had 2 directors, like 5 writers, too many cooks in the kitchen, and no coherent vision as a result. And so it really gives me a lot of confidence. And we've seen this with the Disney Plus shows that in many cases, it's either a writer director or one or 2 directors and a small, and either pretty much one head writer, one head writer as the head of a writing room. And that's it's producing really good stories. When you have that direction, it makes all the difference. So and here's the segue into what you were saying about Captain Marvel 2 is what really excites me is that Captain Marvel 2, only one director, and I think 1 writer as well. I think Nia DaCosta, who's going to direct Captain Marvel 2, I think she's writing it as well. So only 1 or 2 writers on Captain Marvel 2. And so that gives me a lot of confidence that, we got rid of the team who did the first film, and we're going with a new brain trust for Captain Marvel 2. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the same for Miss Marvel. So I do have a lot of confidence for that reason. When you have too many cooks in the kitchen, the whole thing just gets muddled. So I don't think that's going to be a problem with Miss Marvel or Captain Marvel 2. I'm not as worried about it at all. So for you, did you feel that overall this movie was necessary?
Yes, I would say absolutely necessary for a number of reasons. If I was talking about just the MCU timeline, probably not, because this doesn't really add all that much other than new characters that we'll see later, who will probably have their own character introductions anyways.
Yeah.
But given kind of the state of the world right now, and people wanting to get back in theaters, and just kind of our need for a better Captain Marvel, I do think this movie was necessary, and I think it did a really good job.
Absolutely. And also it's kind of a little bit of a palate cleanser, because we're about to go into some very,
weird shit.
Yeah, we're about to go into some really, unorthodox and heady and conceptual directions with, the Eternals definitely, but also Shang-Chi and, Spider-Man No Way Home, which is going to introduce more multiversal chaos, and obviously Doctor Strange and all the rest of the MCU shows and yada, yada, yada. And so this was kind of like a quick trip, kind of reestablishing where we are in the, on the movie side of things, very grounded, very kind of ground level story, filling in some gaps. But now things are going to go back to the way they were with Shang-Chi, and then it's just going to take off from there because, we're going in, as you said, we're going into some crazy places, after this. So, so it laid the groundwork for stuff we're going to see in the future, and also it was a nice welcome back. It was like slipping into a comfortable old pair of shoes. It's just like I remember what this was like. And now we're ready to go into the crazy stuff in the next several months. So absolutely. Yeah. And so is there anything else about Black Widow?
I don't know. I mean, it seems like we're just about out of time. So I got through everything I wanted to.
Yeah. Once again, I just want to, praise the direction, the writing, excellent. Also the score, very good. Really liked the score in this. The supporting cast, as I've said, is tremendous. The widows themselves, I must say, were very good. That not only was the action good, but I liked how, just the visual, because you have these widows from all these different parts of the world, and it was great to see the diversity in the ranks of the Black Widows, because of course, I would not be surprised that if in the future we met more freed Black Widows, like. There's probably I've even said this in the I've heard this said that we'll probably meet a Wakandan Black Widow at some point. There are Wakandans, there are widows all over the world, and so I'm excited to see more of them, especially now that they're going to be all deprogrammed. So that was very good. Great movie, a really fun time at the theater. 8 out of 10.
Go watch it.
Yeah, go watch it.
If for whatever reason you watch this whole podcast after we told you not to watch it because spoilers, go watch it.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Absolutely. And we will have to do that tier list one of these days, because I think that's going to be a really fun conversation. It may be a 3-hour long episode, but we're going to do that. But yes, that was Black Widow.
Yeah. You want to take us home?
Well, as always, I want to thank everyone, all of you out there, for watching. As always, your support makes this show possible, and we love doing it. Thank you very much for joining us this week. I've been Jonathan.
I've been Reid.
And we will speak to you next week with another review.
Good night, everybody.
Goodbye.